Welcome to the Vine Life Podcast. I'm Tony Clark, your host. My special guest today is Tricia Thornton. Now, she has a brand new book out. I think it technically just came out a couple of days ago. The title is Beyond Blessed Parenting, Embrace These 7 Principles and Experience Authentic Connection. She's an author, speaker, and a therapist. Tricia is a licensed professional counselor and also a registered play therapist. And I'll ask questions about that title as well. I'm curious. In addition, she's also an emerging figure in the field of child and family therapy. Now, more information about Tricia can be found at her website. And the website is triciathornton.com. triciathornton.com. And it looks like you can access all of her social media platforms as well from there. But Tricia, thank you so much for coming on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And I want to get into your book and talk a lot about your book and your background. But I think there's a big elephant in the room right now. In the midst of the news, the chaos of the news that's taking place. I do know you came to national attention a couple of years back, and I believe counseling some of the families from the Nashville school shooting when a deranged woman, I personally believe is demonically possessed, slaughtered children. Now, just recently we had a Minnesota school shooter that kind of mimicked those same areas of slaughter, and I think was also demonically possessed, in my opinion. But a very confused man did that as well. A couple of days ago, we had a worldwide, really, assassination with Charlie Kirk. And there's a lot of trauma going on in the news. And my question to you, with your brand new book out, I think it's very timely. How does this book, Tricia, Beyond Blessed Parenting, come into play with parents and children in this chaotic time that we're seeing today?
Yeah, the timeliness of it seems very pertinent. I would say where I feel like there's kind of becoming a breakdown in our society is parents are getting just so much pressure. They're feeling so much upon them to lead their children if you're following a biblical way, you're trying to lead and shepherd your children, but you're getting just bombarded with negative 24/7, and the pressure is so great. And so what's happening is parents are in a position where they're almost being forced to not attend to themselves and just pour themselves into their children. And in the meantime, they're exhausted and they're so overwhelmed that it actually is not helping their children. And their children then are because they don't have that safety and that emotional connection with their parents, the children are seeking that connection in other ways. And so God created our brains beautifully to connect. That is the reason, that is the whole way that we were created, to connect with others. And so I think this book just is, hopefully, it is going to be an encouragement and a prayer. That's my prayer, is that it will encourage and give hope to parents so they can then slow down, pause just a few, and connect first with God and then within themselves so they can be present. And honestly, I don't think it's just parents. We're talking about caregivers. We're talking about people who just care for others. It doesn't even have to be their own children. But I think we have to learn to connect within ourselves so we can then be present with others.
And for sure, this isn't one of my scripted questions. I typically don't script a lot of questions. This is just one on the fly here. I'm sitting here looking at my phone just blinked on me. I'm just curious with parent-child relationship. It seems to be so different than when I was a teenager. And that's been a long time ago. I will admit that. But I didn't have a phone that had instantaneous communication. I didn't have a phone that I could view anything on the internet. I didn't have instantaneous news hitting me 24/7 as a teen or a small child. And many kids, or most kids, have that. How much is that a distraction? How much is that make kids depressed? Or what's your advice? What's your observation on, I guess, the advent of modern technology with instantaneous communication? Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it can be both. I think it can actually serve a good purpose. It can give you hope when you need it. But if you're in a dark place or in a lost place, then your brain is going to be naturally drawn to things that are not positive. But I have to say, I think parents and adults are more addicted to their phones than children. So I don't really I feel like the children are looking to us as adults for guidance in this area. And we are sitting here like this most of the evening. And at soccer practices, I see parents on their phones all the time. And sometimes we have to be. Sometimes we're having to do things. And sometimes we're having to check things. And now we have books and recipes and everything's online. Everything. So, like the other day, I was having a great discussion with a couple of parents in my office about AI. And we were saying it before we go to Google, which is AI, before we go to Chrome, before we go to whatever search engine you're using, can we reuse our resources within? Can we even go to scripture first? Can we not use technology as the first thing we do? And I am guilty of it. I'll be in a session with a child and we'll be talking about anything. I mean, something history, something in entertainment. And I'll be like, I don't know that song. Hold on. I'll go to get my phone. So we have such access to everything. And so we're becoming dependent on it. And we are dependent on it as a society. So I do think there is positive. I saw over this past few days, I personally, but maybe it's just because that's what I'm looking at, but I saw more positive than I saw negative. But I also know that within me, I can't watch the negative. It's not healthy for me. So I don't watch videos of traumatic events because it is too daunting for me, because I have to hold space for so many negative and hard stories. I'll tell you one thing that I gave this advice to the covenant families right after. And this is what I did for me personally, because I was reeling also. I had a trusted friend to be my internet scroller, and that was her duty. And she had a little distance from the situation personally. She got on and scrolled and watched the videos and watched the headlines, and then would report back to me the highlights that I had to know. So I could be kind of involved in the way of knowing the most important information. And so I always advise parents in situations like this that's very close to home. Same with the tragedies at Camp Mystic. I advised parents, get a internet scroller friend who will give you the highlights, so you're not having to just do this. So that was one really easy, not necessarily easy, but it was very helpful for adults to do. And children probably could do the same.
It's very, very
Or
interesting.
teenagers,
I
I should
never
say.
thought of that. I know in your book you've got, I believe, 7 principles or biblical principles for authentic connection. And when you were counseling some of the parents from that horrible attack in Nashville a couple of years back, did they come into play? And can you kind of walk us through what those 7 principles are?
Yeah, so they start with silence, and I would say, let me tell you what the 7 are, and then I'll answer that second part of your question. Um, Silence is the foundational principle. To me, it all hinges on us having some stillness. All throughout scripture, it talks about how Jesus left the disciples to go have that intimate stillness with with God. Listening is the second one. Then acknowledgement, renewal, forgiveness, balance, and embrace. And I, I advise the readers, they can read them in any order, but I do think that starting with silence is key. Because I think once we are able to quiet the noise that we hear 24/7 around us and within us, then we're going to be able to attune and truly connect, or even have a chance to do that. And so the characters that are associated with each of these principles in my book range from age 32 to 72. And some have children, and all of them have children. Some are male, some are female, and some are single parents. So it really kind of covers the gamut. But as the reader reads, they're going to be realizing, because I've had several people without children love the book, and they're like, Tricia, this is not just for parents. This is just for individuals who are so desperately trying to first connect with God and then within themselves so they can be a light to others and be present for others in this world. So, to answer your question, trauma is a continuum and it's a journey. It comes in waves and it comes out of nowhere. It's very intertwined with grief. It's very similar in that way. And so were we able to go through these 7 days after? No, no. No, that's not even realistic. But were we able over time to put in moments and glimpses? I call it sprinkling it in. We have been. We're,
Mm.
you know, coming up in March will be 3 years since that tragedy. So, but there are some that just now are able to be at a place where they're able to begin the work. So it's everyone's in all different places when you come to trauma and a traumatic event. It's not linear. There's no continuum. It's just kind of all over. So you can kind of bounce back and forth. So, to answer your question, yes and no. Some probably have not been able to do all these 7 by any stretch, and some have kind of had glimpses of each.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that first one, just kind of unplugging and getting away, and you used very good biblical examples as well. But it just seems like unplugging and getting away from spending time with just you and God is just a tremendous first step. Because again, we're just bombarded with news, with technology, with everything that's around us, and getting away and unplugging. It seems like a tremendous step and a relief to get away from it, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, one of the quotes that I use in the book often is just that slight movements can cause more substantial and lasting change. We're not talking an overhaul. So, I'm all for technology detoxes, but the reality is our children have to have technology for education. That is just the reality. Their elementary schools are giving iPads. So, giving laptops. That is the reality. So we can't escape it. But how can we learn that it can actually be good and not all for bad? So that's where we're kind of, that's the balance part. I often tell people utilize the tools that come on this phone and use your reminders, use your timers, and put limits on how long you are on Instagram or Facebook or whatever one you want on YouTube. Teen Instagram is really good. So use that for your teenagers and not just general Instagram. I think probably one of the ones that seems to be one of the harder to monitor for parents is YouTube in general. It's really hard to monitor. So that would be one that I would say you really need some close monitoring for the younger. And then I have an 18 and 21-year-old daughters, and I like to have open conversation. Hey, what's your feed? What's popping up? And sadly, what's popping up, because it's by the algorithms, is the negative. So these horrible traumatic images and videos are popping up, and kids aren't even meaning to search for them. But they open up their Instagram, they look at the reels, and it's bam, 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 right there. What happens neurologically is our brain gets like in a trance. It's your default mode network comes online and it's a dopamine rush. And so you can't seem to get yourself out. We go into kind of into a dissociative state. So that's where it can get really hard to monitor. So certainly for younger children, as limited exposure as possible. But it is hard when it's all throughout our classrooms.
Yeah, it's definitely all throughout, and I know that you also talk about having a safe haven at home when
Uh-huh.
the world seems so, unpredictable. What is that safe haven, and how can parents work with their children to create that safe haven?
Yeah, so a couple of ways. The first thing that came to my mind when you said that was consistency in schedules. And that doesn't mean that you can't have fun, and that doesn't mean that you can't get off your schedule. But children, the way their brains were wired in their prefrontal cortex stage of development, they are not able to transition and as easily as us as adults. And we don't even have a hard time with that. So Their flexible thinking skills, what I call in the book called rubber band thinking, is not very strong. And so they're looking to us as adults for that cue of safety. So when you say, how do we create that safe haven? It starts with the parents. That's why the book was written. It is, yes, we need to do certain things for children and use certain tools, but it really starts with us because they co-regulate off of us. So if we're in a state of hypervigilance, they're going to become hypervigilant. The first character in the book, Sally, is the busy life of Sally. She's my character for Silence. And Sally began to realize that the louder the noise became within her brain, and within her, and the busier she got, literally and figuratively, the louder her house became. The more meltdowns
Wow.
her children were having, the harder they were having to go to sleep. So that to me is very key, is if we can create some consistency starting first with us so we can then send that cue to our children.
Very good. Very good. Relatable transparency about the imperfections of parenting. I know you talk about that as well. And I think you're very relatable in this. I think, would you want to talk about maybe some of your own struggles with
Oh, goodness, yes.
transparency as a parent that all parents have?
We have all day for me to talk about all the things I did wrong. One of the reasons why I wrote the book is because I felt like as a young parent, I did not understand the importance of the cross of connection framework, which is what guides throughout the book. And what that looks like is on the top of the cross is God. And if you're not a follower of God, then it could be a higher power. It could be whatever. But for me, from my Christian faith, it's God. Then the top part of the cross is oneself. And then the actual cross part is with a partner, with a friend, with a community, then your children. So it's a lot of connecting up here before we get to our children. And what I did not quite grasp was I skipped this a lot. This was really not we weren't connecting, my husband and me. And I just dove into my children, and all my identity and all my energy and everything went into my children. And I was just a busy person running around all over the place. And I had some self-awareness up here, mainly just because of my training and what I did. But inside, in my internal sides, I was running all over. And eventually it breaks down. And so eventually my children did have anxiety. They did have a hard time because I was pouring myself into them and forgetting myself, number one, or losing myself. And I certainly was forgetting my marriage. So that was a lot of my own turmoil within me. I honestly, when I get asked, why did you write the book? I didn't have a choice not to write the book. I had to write the book. So God just said, write this book. And I wrote it. It took about 7.5 months and I wrote it. But in the front cover of the book, in the first few pages, right after the preface, is the diagram of the cross
Okay.
of connection so people can see that visually. But I feel, to me, when I probably felt like I was reeling the most I'm not perfect by any stretch. And that's one thing I say throughout the book. There is no perfect parent. There is literally no perfect parent. We may have parents that we admire more than others, but there is no perfect parent. What I have learned is when my children, and even when they were younger, they would kind of say this. I think one of my most vivid memories of this is I was in the hallway. We have a little ranch style house, and I was in the hallway. My husband and I were having a really hard time. I don't remember exactly what it was that got me emotional, but I lost it. And I just started crying. And I remember my older daughter and younger daughter both came out and were like, Mama, are you okay? And I mean, they were kind of little. And when they see Mama cry, it alarms a child. I just remember thinking, I remember sitting in that moment, feeling and realizing, I don't think I'm in a great place. I don't think I'm in a great place. And so I sought out my own therapy and my own wise counsel. And that began to put me in a better place and put me in a more connected place with guidance and spiritual guidance. But I think when I love it the most is when my children say, Mom, I think you need to go get in the bubble bath. I think you need to go take a walk. And so, but if we can hear that without getting too defensive and realize, oh, thank you, and take a pause, embrace that pause, and then go forward. That's a really beautiful example of emotional boundaries that my children have learned.
I appreciate your honesty, and it seems like a lot of books you read from experts that in certain different fields, they seem to never struggle with the same issues that we all struggle with. But I certainly appreciate your honesty because we all
Uh,
learn from our goof ups and our
by no
mistakes and our
means do I
failures,
have
right?
all 7 of these down pat. By no means.
Well, they're very good 7 steps. And I'm curious, that title of a registered play therapist is
We
kind of off base, but it kind of relates to what you
right?
do. What does that mean exactly? Registered play therapist. What does that entail?
So, play therapy has been around for years. And the reason why it's so effective is because we're using the natural language of play for children in their stage of development. It would be lovely if a child could just walk in and they can maybe sometimes logically say, oh, Miss Tricia, mommy and daddy are getting a divorce. But that it's not all connecting within their head and their heart. And so for the play is their tool to show me their internal world, and I get a glimpse of their of what really they're thinking. So we use tools such as sand tray, puppets, dollhouse, expressive art therapy, some music therapy, bibliotherapy, all sorts of ways that we sit. And so I have adult office behind me, and then next door, right over here on this other side of the wall, I have a playroom that's really inviting and full of manipulatives that we can use, that a child can come in and really feel like that's their safe haven. And I'm just holding space for them to tell me their story through their natural language of play.
Oh, that's fascinating. And that title, and I was thinking I kind of had an idea, but I don't think I did until
Yeah.
you explained that. But it certainly makes sense to definitely relate to
And people can
to the kids.
really, the Association for Play Therapy, it's has some wonderful resources. And so I always point people to that to find out more about it.
Again, fascinating. And I do know that you've had some trauma in your life. You deal with parents and children and help them work through the trauma that they've experienced. But you just want to go into that just a little bit. How does your own trauma relate to what you do now?
Yeah. So for a long time, I felt that trauma wasn't what I had experienced because I thought trauma was somebody who had been sexually abused or physically abused or had lived in a war zone or was coming out of something horribly traumatic. I didn't quite understand until I really began to have training and studying and doing my own work that there's all levels of trauma. So at 6.5 years old, when my grandmother very tragically got killed in our driveway when her car rolled back
Wow.
over her. I wasn't present in the home at the time, but she was a second mom to me. I spent more time at practically at May's house than I did at my own. And so for me to lose her and for my mother to lose her mother in such a traumatic way at such a young age. I mean, she was only in her 30s. So for us to experience that massive loss in such a dramatic way, I didn't realize how that was trauma on my brain. And then 3 weeks later, we were robbed by 2 intruders to come inside our home. And from that day forward, the mixture of those two, they just kind of are one big ball of trauma for me. I went through my whole entire life riddled with fear, like literal and figurative. And my brain kind of lived in a state of confusion of are the robbers going to come back and is somebody else going to get hurt and how am I really okay, and everything began to twist and turn inside of me. And so when I hear, it kind of gets me when I hear children suffer in my office from trauma, my heart just breaks because I kind of get it. I don't get what exactly they're going through. I don't get the exact situation. I did not live through a school shooting, or I didn't live through my parents' tragedies or whatever, a death of a parent, but I do get the feeling of fear. I really do understand that. And I think that fear imprinted upon my brain so dramatically that I can relate to a little bit of that lost feeling. And so what I love is when I get to work with younger children because I feel like I'm giving them a little hope that I didn't really get when I was younger.
Well, and definitely, if you've gone through similar experiences, you can certainly relate to someone who's going through maybe not that exact experience, but
Yeah.
something similar,
Mhm.
specifically with trauma because you've had it in your past
Yeah.
as well. And that's fascinating to the relational aspect that you can have with these kids, even as adults. Very, very good. A parent out there, before they read your, say they're going to order your book, and I'll give all that information in just a couple of minutes. I highly recommend you place that order. But say they want to order your book, but in the meantime, Tricia, is there one small change that they could make to
Mhm.
connect with their children on a more relatable basis, just in the meantime, before the book comes in the mail?
100%. Yeah. Probably the one that I would steer them the most is it's a two-part step. The first part is to name their feelings. Just name 'em. Just literally, I call it hand on the heart activity. You're going to put your hand on your heart, and I just want you to list bullet point mad, scared, overwhelmed, fearful, enraged, alone, unsafe, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. Try so hard not to judge, just name them. And I tried to give the freedom for people not to feel like they have to give a long explanation. They're just quick words. And then once they do that, can they identify in their body where are they feeling that feeling? For me, it's here. It's all in the back of my neck when I am doing this a lot and rubbing my shoulders and kind of feeling angst in my stomach and in my gut. I know that I'm carrying too much. And once your body gives you, that's the beauty that God gave our bodies. They're all tied. All of these organs inside of us are tied. And so if they can just name the feeling and then notice what it feels like, that's a massive step for them to embrace the start of all of these principles. They're just slowing themselves down.
Slowing themselves down sounds like very, very good advice. Now, I'm curious, your book before this, I believe, is Blessing from Fear. How does this book, Beyond Blessed Parenting, how does it build on your first book?
Yeah. So I've had a lot of people say, "Do I have to buy the first book?" And I'm always like, "Oh, my little light went out." Yes, you don't have to, but I will have to say, I love that they build upon each other. Because Blessing from Fear is my story. It's me using myself as the example, and I intertwine neuroscience and biology and spirituality and psychology all together in both of these books. Parents will get tools from the book one, but when they read book one and then they read book two, they're like, wow, I really get where she's coming from. That's my story. So it's my journey, my personal journey of overcoming fear. So it's a lot of memoir in there wrapped up with all of the neuroscience and psychology and spirituality. So I think they build upon each other, but they're not necessary.
Very good. I'm curious, Tricia, this new book, Beyond Blessed Parenting, what type of feedback have you had from it so far?
Yeah. It's actually done incredible. In the pre-sales, we hit number one in Amazon in a category,
Wow.
and it was amazing. I was thrilled. I've had overwhelming response on social media for the book. And all I can say for that is I believe wholly in Ecclesiastes, there is a time, there's a season for everything. And the timing of this book is very interesting. The fact that this book came out, and within 3 weeks of this book launching, we've had a school shooting in every level of schools. We've had elementary, we've had middle slash high, or elementary middle. Then we had high school. Then we had college with Charlie Kirk. We've had a shooting on every level of campuses. And for the fact that this book came out when it did it's odd. That's God to me. And I pray every time I hand this book to somebody or I do an interview or I s glance at Amazon or whatever it is. I don't have time to glance at it much, but when my publicist tells me what what's happening with it. I am like so incredibly thankful because my prayer is that it will give hope to those who need it so desperately. So it's gone very
Parent
well.
out there, yeah, go ahead.
No, it's gone really well. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, and a parent out there who is was needing this book, needing this advice. Tricia, what's the best way that they can purchase the
Yeah.
book?
So really, it's anywhere books are sold. They can go on Amazon, just do the search for Beyond Blessed Parenting. It will pop right up, or they can go directly on my website. And I have links to every which way on my website at triciathornton.com. Another place that I really advise, especially before the book comes, I tell people follow Tricia Thornton Therapy on Instagram and Facebook because I post videos and give helpful tips for caregivers and parents every week. And it's chopped full of really good, easy how to's, but a lot of I expand on some of the tools in the book and explain them and give examples. I give scripts of when your child does this, do this. And so I think it will be a great also asset for a resource beyond just ordering the book.
Very good. And Tricia, what's on your agenda? Are you all consumed with this book right now, or have you made plans for the next book, the next speaking engagement? What's on your agenda?
So, well, daily I'm in my office and I'm in the trenches working with parents every single day. That's my number one priority is to still dig in and be a resource here in Nashville for my families. And then in about 2 weeks, I'm speaking at the American Association of Christian Counselors Conference here at Opryland in Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm really excited. I'll be speaking about school shootings and the recovery. And I'll also be speaking about the neurological effects of fear on today's youth. So those 2 speeches are coming up. I'm traveling to Atlanta next week and doing some appearances on some TV shows. So I've got a few things up my sleeves, got lots of interviews, but book 3, there's not been a word written, but I do have a book and I do know kind of the avenue that I'm going to be taking. I have had the conversation with my publisher, so no deadline, no kind of release date or anything, but we're in talk about it.
I'm just, as you were speaking, I just pulled up your website and you've definitely got a lot of information. You've got free downloads,
Mm-hmm.
you've got events, you've got a newsletter,
Mm-hmm.
articles, media and press. So if someone wants to check out your social media platforms, it looks like they can just go to your website at
Go to my website.
triciathornton.com. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, correct. And yes, there is thank you for reminding me. I always forget to say that. There is a free download and all they have to do is click. They are going to be able to give me their email and their name so they get my newsletter as well, which just comes out quarterly. And then they will be able to read the first 2 chapters of Beyond Blessed Parenting for free. So they can get a little taste.
Well, very good. Tricia, have I forgot anything? Anything you want to add about the book that you want to throw in
I
there?
can't think of anything else. There is an audiobook coming out, but it's going to be a little bit. So go ahead and get
Gotcha.
your book, start underlining it, and then you can listen to me later.
Absolutely. And I'm a big fan of audiobooks, especially when I drive long
Mhm.
distance. It tends
And
to hold
I
my attention,
narrated it.
basically.
By the way, I
Yeah,
narrated it. So it was a long day of
awesome.
recording.
I'll bet. But, I do like audiobooks where the actual author is speaking. A lot of times authors get, an American will get a British guy or
Yeah,
gal to read their book, and it just seems so weird because
yeah,
they're not British,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
appreciate that.
No, this is my Southern accent will be all there.
There you go. I've got one too. So I appreciate that. So Tricia, I can't thank you enough for coming on the program. And again, more information about Tricia and her book, triciathornton.com, and you can order that book. Again, Beyond Blessed Parenting, Embrace the 7 Principles and Experience Authentic Connection. Tricia, I will ask you to hang on about 30 seconds post interview, but thank you so much for coming on the program today.
Thank you so much.